Yo, everybody. Welcome to Off Panel, a weekly interview podcast about all things comics, brought to you by Sketch.com. I'm your host, David Harper, and this week's guest is the writer of The Ghost in You, the latest Reckless book, to say nothing of a whole lot of other comics. It's Ed Brubaker. Thanks for coming on, Ed.
Hey, thanks for having me.
So, we're recording this on the Friday after The Ghost in You was released. For some reason, we always talk after your books are released. I don't know why that is. How's launch week going?
Well, it's not the right time.
I don't know. I mean, what is the right time? You've done a lot of interviews. Is there a right time?
I don't know. If I was on Fresh Air, I would want it to be like the week after the book came out. Or the day of, maybe.
Okay, so like let's say flashing back to when you were doing Criminal and Single Issues. Criminal and Single Issues, I feel like you'd want the interview to go up first because FOC and orders and all this stuff like that.
Oh, yeah.
But I feel like with Reckless, because it's a different, it's a graphic novel. It's kind of, you're really looking to sell it to people so shops can reorder it and everything like that. I wonder if it is a little bit different. Like you do want it to come out after.
I feel like you want a burst of publicity to remind everybody about the book, like when it's in final orders and stuff. And it feels like we get now, because, this is like now 2 years of solid graphic novels for us. But especially with Reckless, because it's a series, like we announce the next book like right before one of them comes out, and in the back of the book we have the cover for the next book. Mm-hmm. So around that time we've like told you which one's coming next in like 5 or 6 months, and then we get when the new book comes out, we get like a burst of publicity around that, and then when FOC for the whatever the next book is, so it's kind of like, it's a different pattern for publicity. With single issues though, like after the first 3, it's very hard to get anyone to really talk about them at all. So it's been tricky figuring out how to, juggle trying to get coverage on these books while working on the books. And we put them out so fast that we're almost, our own worst enemies in that way. Like I saw someone just the other day online, like writing a rave review about Destroy All Monsters, and I don't think they realized the new book was coming out. And like, so, but I think the real, with going graphic novels only, getting it out, getting publicity around the release, like the couple weeks before and like the month after, feels like the right kind of groove to me. Like I have I think an LA Times profile coming out in the next like week or so about the whole series. And it's like you want to, because with standard monthly comics, you get comic book press like when new volumes of a trade paperback are coming out. When it's like volume 5 of something, unless it's one of like the 5 really big things in the world, unless it's Saga,
right?
Even towards the end, Walking Dead, like you barely heard when a new volume of the trade was coming out. It was just like the biggest thing ever, so nobody talked about it.
I actually wrote about Reckless in my Friday column this week, and part of it was about that, where it's just sometimes when the expectation is greatness and it's been going for a while, whether it's a series or if it's even a creative team, it's almost like people, I call it metronome comics. People just get kind of sucked into the rhythm, and it just is what it is, and the conversation doesn't surround it. Not to say that the book isn't doing well. I mean, that's one of the things I think is interesting. In an ideal world, these books are like a rising tide that lifts all ships. Maybe the Destroy All Monsters review going up at this random time right around when The Ghost in You doesn't make a lot of sense, but maybe somebody discovers it then and maybe buys all 4 books when The Ghost in You comes out. Do you find that the books kind of build on each other in like in that sort of way? Are you finding all the dads out there like you once had designs on?
Well, I don't know how much I'm finding them yet. I'm hoping to find them more as more books come out, and I'm in the early stages of talking to some people about possible movie adaptations with like a big movie star attached that I can't officially discuss yet. That should help if that ever happened. I feel like the series does kind of sell itself to people. Like in Europe, I remember they always said once you got past the 3rd book in a series is when it really started to become a thing that became part of like the culture. And I kind of feel like that with these books a little bit now. Like when I see people talking about them online more, it's like people are sort of they're embracing like both the fact that we're doing these graphic novels and getting them out so rapidly, but they're also embracing like the object part of it. Like
Yeah.
the are these really nice like hardbacks on nice paper, which God, with the all the supply chain stuff, like nice paper like went up quite a bit between books 3 and 4.
Yeah.
um, but yeah, I find that they do kind of all sell each other, and that's one of the things where you just never really know like how much do I need to try to push this, or how much of this is like all the people who know about these books already are already planning to buy the next ones, and it's just about trying to continue to reach wider and wider, and bring in more people. Like I feel like our readership sort of grows with every new project that we do to some degree, and then you get your sort of peaks and valleys. Like when you put out 4 graphic novels in a year and a half in a series, you gotta expect that some of the people who bought volume 1 are planning to still get volumes 3 and 4, but they haven't gotten around to it yet.
Well, and the beauty of this is it's funny, like looking back on like the books that kind of like inspired you for a lot of this stuff. I know it was like Parker books, like Raymond Chandler, things like that. And it's interesting. I mean, I'm trying to remember the other ones. There was some other ones that were big inspirations, but one of the things I think is interesting about this is people forget that the most powerful marketing tool is word of mouth. And so it's like when people really enjoy something, they'll talk about like when a friend wants to like pick up a comic that they can just read. It's a one and done story, or they can read a series or something like that. Reckless kind of fills all those needs. And I think that that's really powerful. I do think it's really interesting, though. You're getting to a point where at some point there's going to be a very handsome box set you can make of these. And I think that that would be a very popular thing because I don't know, I feel like box sets have done really well for these series over the past few years.
Yeah, especially with us with like the criminal hardbacks. Like we had some of those were out of print for a long time.
Yeah.
Until just last year, and when we put those out, it was like a huge fiasco getting them out for some reason. There was like all this problems between Diamond and Amazon, and I was like pulling my hair out, whatever hair I have left, and then suddenly, like within a couple weeks of them being out, we had sold so many. Like, holy shit, a lot of people have been waiting like 10 years to get these books. And because we've got some other of our deluxe hardbacks out of print too that I've been now looking at.
I think you would actually appreciate this. I'm doing this feature where I'm looking at publishers in like the mid tier in the direct market. And I was talking to a publisher recently, and one said that one of the big things that's blown up during the pandemic isn't new comics, it's their backlist. And I thought that was really fascinating. Like, and then I thought of that when I would finish The Ghost in You, because you always have those ads in the back where it shows all the things you and Sean have done. Is that something you've seen as well? Like people kind of discovering your past work during this?
Definitely, yeah. In the last like year, we've had to send so many books back to print. The Fade Out is in like its 4th printing, the single edition version of that. Pulp has gone through 3 or 4 printings already. Yeah, a lot of our stuff, a lot of interest picked up from that. I think I'll give Eric Stevenson credit for this. We used to just have like a single page at the back of our graphic novels that had like the titles of all the other books with our ISBN numbers and stuff. And Eric was like, you should make like a multi-spread thing where you show people the covers actually, which we did for the first time in the back of, I think, in the back of Pulp maybe, or in the back of one of them, we did that for the first time. And like ever since we did that, like I feel like our backlist has kind of exploded. Like these books are just advertising like, oh, that's a cool looking cover, let's grab that and see what that is.
Yeah.
So it's been really interesting to see that, because I was like, oh, I don't think it's going to make any difference, and Eric was totally right.
I mean, it makes sense because it's like, let's say you're a person who just happens to pick up The Ghost in You as your first book, and you're like, oh, that was really good. I've never read anything from these. This is a hypothetical person. I don't know how many people who consistently read comics are like, who's this Brubaker and Phillips? Like, I don't understand who these people are, but
I hear from people all the time, though, who whatever new book we've just put out is the first time that they finally decided to buy one of their books because one of their friends wouldn't shut up about us for X amount of years. It was like, you still haven't read a Brubaker and Phillips book? So, but I do hear like Kill or Be Killed was a huge one for us as far as like a bunch of new readers that, had never checked out our stuff before. And I think because that had a guy in a mask on the cover, maybe.
Yeah, it's kind of a slightly different flavor for you. I guess that was Incognito didn't really have masks. I guess that was yeah, that was maskless. But well, we're here to talk about The Ghost in You. It's the latest Reckless book from you, Sean Phillips, and Jacob Phillips. I'm gonna read the solicit. It's the winter of 1989, and Ethan is out of town, so this time Anna has to tackle the job on her own. When a movie scream queen, Lorna Valentine, isn't that the name?
Yeah.
Asks her to prove the mansion she's renovating isn't haunted, Anna will stumble into a decades-long mystery of one of Hollywood's most infamous murder houses, a place with many dark secrets, some of which might just kill her. It's another superb entry into the Reckless series. It's amazing. I loved it. But with the added wrinkle of it being focused on Anna this time instead of Ethan, so the supporting character becomes the star character. You covered this in the back of the book, saying each book of the series in one way or another has grown out of the one before it. But I want to get into that because I think Anna being the lead is not something I would have imagined, or being the lead for a story was not something I would have imagined after the first book. Why did you want to mix things up and focus on Anna for a book after 3 books where Ethan was the lead?
I think it was just an instinct when we initially launched the series, my goal at the time was like, let's try and get 3 of these out in a year and then see where we're at. Maybe we'll take a break and do something else. Maybe we'll keep doing these books. And then I told Kirkman at some point, I was like, yeah, I think we'll do 3 and then we'll probably take a break, do like a standalone thing or something like that, and then come back and do a couple more. And Kirkman was like, had just finished reading the second book, like before it came out, like months before it came out. And he was like, no, these are great. You got to keep doing these. You got to do at least 5 of them before you take a break. And I was like, I don't always Kirkman's advice, but he does seem to know what he's talking about stuff a lot of the time.
Yeah.
Most successful person I know in the entire comics industry. So I thought, all right, I'm sure I can come up with more ideas. I've got, I had jotted down a bunch of ideas in my notebook, and I was looking at, at that point, I think I was in the early stages of writing Destroy All Monsters, and I had just written the chapter that was like about how Ethan and Anna met and her childhood and everything. And I think at that point I just started thinking, oh, it would be interesting if it was like more focused on Anna, because, Destroy All Monsters, the 3rd book, so much of it was really, the heart of the book was really about their friendship and how weird it is to have like a, non-sexual friendship between a man and a woman, where it's like actually your best friend who you really rely on, and the age difference and just everything about their weird relationship. And I was like noodling on the idea for The Ghost in You, and then I wrote the chapter of Destroy All Monsters that was the Anna point of view chapter, which was sort of my, well, if Richard Stark can do it, so can I. Mm-hmm. I'm just going to have random chapters from other people's point of view sometimes. And when I was working on that, I just thought, yeah, I think definitely like the next book will just be like much more focused on Anna. And then when I started jotting down all my ideas for it, I realized it would be a fun thing to do for books 4 and 5 to have Ethan be out of town in book 4, and then book 5 shows you what Ethan was doing while he was out of town, so he could come back, into book 4 towards the end if I wanted him to. And I just thought, well, that'll be a fun way to link those 2 books. They take place sort of over the same period of time.
I mean, honestly, I thought that was one of the smartest things about the book was I actually didn't know the 5th book was like, I knew Follow Me Down was it. I knew the cover art. I didn't know it was going to be like the second hand of the 2-hander that was their stories going on concurrently. It makes sense that it developed as you were developing The Ghost in You, because they're like two sides of the same coin.
Yeah, definitely. I realized after delving so deeply into Ethan and Anna's friendship in book 3, to Destroy All Monsters, I wanted to see who Ethan was like outside of Anna in a way, like, because she's the supporting cast in the first book, but you don't spend that much time with her. And then I felt like by the end of book 2, we'd seen enough of her to know that their friendship was just like the most important thing between them, and that she was a really capable, interesting character. And by the time I even started writing this, I think even in my notebooks, like early on, like always the third book was going to be the one that focused more on them and spent more time with the two of them together, and sort of showed her growing into her own, potentially her own like lead investigator. But yeah, it was really fun. And it was nice that it's different too, like, because Ethan is such a, when violence happens, he's, I mean, he's not Wolverine, but he doesn't have a healing factor, but he ends up in the hospital a lot.
Yeah, yeah.
Whereas with Anna, it's like she remembers her one like trick that Ethan taught her about like holding a roll of pennies in your hand. So I thought that was a lot of fun. And I think those panels that Sean drew in the flashbacks in Destroy All Monsters of Anna as a kid with her mom, and like the mom's sleazy boyfriend making out with her on the couch, like all of that stuff, I feel like really just sort of dug into my brain and helped illuminate a little bit more of who Anna was, and what parts of my own history and my friend's history with our weird moms, was I like gonna pull from to stitch together this, sort of, I think Anna's history is tragic, and yet I don't think of her as a tragic character.
Yeah.
You know? Like she's gone through a lot of shit, but she doesn't take shit from people.
There's a line at the end, and I feel like this is like the world's smallest spoilers. So I would say Ethan says, "Look, I know she's a mess, but if not for all of her bullshit, then who knows who you'd be." And like that's the thing is like that's in some ways the defining line of the book, in that Anna's childhood sucked in a lot of ways, but at the same time, she turned out great in the end, and it's what led her on this path to being this character that we know.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think about that a lot with like even my wife. Like my wife is one of my favorite people in the whole world, obviously. And every now and then when childhood stuff comes up, I have to stop myself from getting really angry about like something that happened to her, or that her parents did or whatever, because I keep thinking, well, if they hadn't done all that fucked up shit, or if you hadn't had to go through this or that thing, like you would have ended up a totally different person.
Yeah.
So in some weird ways, like the people that you end up being, like either married to, or your sort of makeshift family of friends, like you always find people who've gone through similar shit than you, it seems like.
Yeah.
Or in that way, people who've suffered like similar pains. And I think it's really interesting because it's not, I'm not like it's fate or whatever, like we're all meant to go through whatever shit, like obviously it's terrible when you have to go through a childhood tragedy.
Right, right.
But when you look at who the person turned out to be, it's kind of like, well, I'm sorry you had to go through that, but you're pretty cool for me.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. And like that's what it took for Anna to get there. I do think one of the really interesting things about the split between The Ghost in You and Follow Me Down is you mentioned how Ethan now is going to have this story where he's, he doesn't have Anna. But I also think that puts Anna into an interesting position because it was weird. I had this like comparison in my brain where like Ethan and Anna's whole setup is like a very low budget version of James Bond's setup, where like she's kind of like the money penny, and then like Frank is like M, I guess. I don't know. I had this thing in my head, but it's funny because Anna has the support network that Ethan normally has in The Ghost in You, where she goes to Byron the movie guy, she goes to Frank because her and Frank are friends now. She even goes to Dimitri, her terrible doesn't talk during Jeopardy ex-boyfriend, because he has some expertise. And like I thought that was really cool because you now get to see what Anna would be like if she worked with the same crew, and see how her relationship is completely different with Frank and with Byron. But then now Ethan, I mean, I'm sure we're going to get introduced to an entirely different world of people he kind of orbits, or that orbit him in the next story.
Yeah, Frank is still in the book in some ways, but yeah, book 5, the Follow Me Down, what Ethan's story in San Francisco is the most. I don't know. It's not. It probably other people won't think of it as being too different than the other ones, but for me, it's like the most different of all the books in a lot of different ways, because it is Ethan sort of on this mission on his own, on a case he didn't really want to take, but doing a favor for a friend, and just goes down some really dark paths. And the whole, I mean, I could talk about it and ruin the book for everybody, but yeah, we're like probably like 2/3 done with that book already right now. So it goes, I think it's going to the printer in August.
I did want to talk about how you approached this one because there's a lot of similarities between an Anna adventure and an Ethan adventure. Or I don't even know if adventure is the right right word. It's like a case. It's a case. Yeah.
Yeah. Any story where it's like what happens next is an adventure, right?
That's true. That's true. But they're way different people. Like their approach is going to be different. Was there a balance you needed to achieve where it still felt like a Reckless book, but it was shaped to match Anna's personality and approach? Or did you view it in much the same way as the other 3 volumes?
Well, structurally, I did the flash forward opening chapter to sort of tease where it was headed. But I thought of it more, I just really thought like, oh, I'm just going to tell Anna's story and let it sort of meander at its own pace. I feel like it's much, it's, even though it's a mystery plot and everything, I feel like it's more character driven in some ways than the other ones, maybe. Like it's more about, because it's Anna and she's running the movie theater, which is an actual like, enterprise with people coming and paying to see movies. So she's got to do that, and she's the main projectionist there. She's balancing this case. Ethan's out, so she's got to sort of do everything. And I really just kind of wanted to see all these pieces of her life kind of collide together. Like in some way, I think she knows that when she reaches out to Madame Marlena to come check out the supposedly haunted house, that this is going to drag her mom back into her life. And it's like, it's one of those things where, I think we all do kind of self-destructive things around our family in some ways. And it's like, there's some part of Anna that always misses her mom and wants to see her mom and wants her mom to sort of be that idealized version of her that she thinks of from childhood.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I didn't think about it too much as far as like, is this going to feel enough like the other books? I wanted it to feel, I knew it would feel like the same world because of all the different characters and because Anna was such a big part of the last book, especially. But I was totally fine if it just felt like, the sidekick is in charge this time book. And I saw someone online, some like movie critic, the other day said that this new book was as if John D. McDonald had decided to do a Travis McGee book and only have his like next door neighbor best friend guy in the book, which I was like, that's hilarious because it would be a really strange book. Oh, Meyer, yeah, the sidekick character in that was Meyer, who's like a weird old college professor.
The funny thing is, though, this gives me hope for like a Byron book because I love Byron as a character. That would be probably a step too far because we've gotten like, I don't know, 10 total pages of Byron so far. I love that character. I don't know why.
Yeah, he's a cool character. Yeah, I know. That's the thing is like, I don't want this to end up like Criminal, where every time you turn around, like another character is now the star of their own book. I figured I could get away with it with Anna for one book at least, maybe more. We'll see.
It's funny going into it. The biggest question I had, like, it's like I knew it was going to be great. I knew it was going to feel like a Reckless book. I knew it was going to feel like you and Sean. I wasn't sure what you were going to do with the narration, just because. So fundamentally, I think this is another spoiler-ish, but it's just it's been established that this is Ethan writing about his own life. Like this is Ethan tracking his own life. This is a story that he had no part in. And I was really curious as to what you were going to do. And I feel like you had a perfect solution because it's kind of like an omniscient narrator. And then at the end, when you have like the hard split with the black page, then it trips back to Ethan.
Yeah, in the epilogue. I kind of, one of the things that I've decided to do recently was not to follow any of my own rules anymore, and just, if I can pull something off where nobody's like, hey, you're cheating, then I'm going to try and do it. And like when I did in the first book, when I did like a chapter from the point of view of the bad guy, Wilder, where we got to see like this chapter happening from the other guy's point of view in the midst of a book that had been all first person narration by the hero before that. And I just thought, well, Westlake used to do this all the time, but he would have third person narration through the whole thing. So I just decided I'm just going to see if I can get away with this, and if anyone calls me on it, and no one did, and I was like, oh, this is great. And then in Destroy All Monsters, I had that Anna chapter that was all third person, but you could get the sense that Ethan was told everything
Right.
and knew this. So I kind of figured, I could do that for the whole book basically. And this time it's like, because it's still Ethan writing the stories in the future.
Yeah. This is kind of a random thing to bring up, but you brought up Wilder. Did he wake up from a nap into that situation? I'm trying to remember.
He was sitting on his couch smoking a joint and reading
Okay.
the Anne Rule book about Ted Bundy, The Stranger Beside Me or something, or The Killer Beside Me, or whatever that Ted Bundy Anne Rule book is.
I know that he was a terrible person, but man, what a horrible change from having a pleasant afternoon to being dead. Like, that was a really quick downfall for that guy.
He was literally just sitting there and thinking, why is everyone so obsessed with Ted Bundy?
And then he's fighting someone with a machete.
Yeah.
Tough times for Wilder. Tough times for Wilder. And now, a quick word from one of off-panel sponsors. Macroverse is a next-generation digital comics platform, and one with an astonishing number of comics, with currently over 50 series from over 100 creators on their app, with a 5-star rating both on Apple and Google's app stores. Download the app and binge all their titles, including the Eisner-nominated Remind from Jason Brubaker, Lisa K. Weber's Hex 11, which has been described as Harry Potter meets Blade Runner, or the new queer supernatural adventure series Husk that launches on November 1st. It's just $4.99 a month to subscribe to Macroverse, with proceeds directly supporting the creators on the platform. Keep an eye on the future of Macroverse 2, as 2022 is going to bring an epic upgrade that offers a new level of digital collectability and more, with early adopters able to sign up for more information at macroverse.com. And now, back to the show. You wrote in the back about how a lot of the series so far was autobiographical, but not everything is. I did like that you worked in specific elements. Like in this one, it was more like some of your experiences were color for Anna's life. Like there was the horror show hosts with Evelina.
Yeah.
And then there was also the the obsession with like murder mansions, or like, these houses where which interestingly enough, I don't know if this is just because I can think of a few high profile examples, but I feel like that's a common thing that comic writers are interested in. I don't know why.
Murder houses.
Yeah.
A lot. Well, it's funny because I know there was that zine Murder Can Be Fun, which the zine that her boyfriend makes in
with the Christmas tree.
Book. Yeah, that's like we very much sort of use that as an inspiration, the look of those old zines from like the late 80s, early 90s. But yeah, I feel like I've known in my life a lot of people from different walks of life who have all been kind of murder house obsessed. I can remember when I first moved to Seattle, there was like a guy who would give you a walking tour of the university district that was like the Ted Bundy walking tour of all like the important places Ted Bundy had been. Like, this is a bar where he kidnapped a woman, and this is a house where he bashed a woman's head in, and people would pay money to go do that. So it definitely felt like a thing that used to be more of a thing in the 80s and 90s, like this obsession with serial killers or murder houses. And like the 2 or 3 places that I've combined to make the Lemoore Mansion, like one of them is like a place that I actually walk by regularly, and then another one is this house that was like around the corner from a bunch of different people I knew who all had stories about it. And that was like that's the one where they actually did leave up a Christmas tree and Christmas presents, and it was like a famous house. And up until a few years ago, it was just like that, and people would break in and take pictures and stuff, like way back in the 60s. And that was one of the ones where it was like the house must have been worth so much money too. It was in like the Los Feliz Hills, like just around the corner from like like some really expensive like Frank Lloyd Wright house that sold for like $19 million or something.
I thought it was very fitting that the Lamore mansion. Well, I don't want to get into that because that's technically a spoiler for what happens with the house. But it's like
Oh
its fate is very fitting given the way that the world has went. But
yeah,
I think it's smart though. I think it was DC Black Label editor Chris Conroy had tweeted about the book, and he was saying that like in this book there was like a specific landmark in there that was one of his favorite places in LA in The Ghost in You. And
oh yeah,
I do think that's one of the nice things about, you're not Anna's story is not your story, but you're taking things from your life and from LA that you remember and things like that, and imbuing her story with those things. I mean, that's how you ground a character and connect with people with that character, right?
yeah. It's a funny thing too because I think she might be everyone's favorite character from the books even before she got her own book.
Yeah.
I was getting a lot of email from people about it, and I remember Sean, when we were working on the second book, Sean said she was his favorite character to draw out of all the characters in the book, and she's only in probably like 10 or 15 pages of the second book. So like, oh okay, well she's going to be in the book more and more. But yeah, it did feel like a like I was telling a friend of mine that I the final chapter of The Ghost in You is one, I don't know, I don't like rank my work really, but I felt like when I read the book over, when I got my copies and I read through it to make sure all the pages are in the right order and everything, and I got to the last chapter, I thought this might be the best thing I've ever written. And in a weird way, because it's such a small human chapter after everything else has happened, but I felt like when I got to the last page, and it's just, I don't want to ruin it, but it just felt like I felt like both of those characters really existed in a
Yeah.
weird way, that it sometimes takes a while of writing a character before you just really feel like you know them. And I feel like we've spent the last 2 years just drawing stories of these characters. And as I was looking at them and thinking about their lives, it was almost like, it's that cliche of like when the characters come to life and start making their own decisions. But like when I was writing that last page, I didn't know some of that stuff as I was writing it, and then I looked at it and I thought, oh, this is really sweet. Like these guys are like, it's almost like they're old long lost friends of mine that I never knew that I had or something, and
Yeah.
that their stories feel almost like they could have really happened, like the places they're in. I think that's part of what grounding it in LA and in that time period. It's like it gives it a certain amount of nostalgia, but it gives it a certain realism too, and allows you to think of these as people who really lived.
I actually wrote about this in my 10 things column. I agree with you. I think the ending to this one was, I mean, when I say it's particularly strong for you and Sean, that's very high. That's a very like high bar to surpass. But I do think that's one thing that works particularly well in the Reckless series. And I was trying to diagnose exactly why that is when I was writing about it. Like part of it I think might be the graphic novel format where you have more runway to build to that ending. But then also I don't know what it is, but it's like your final pages in particular on all four volumes, and I revisited all four of them just to look at this. They're just killers every time. So good. Oh, the other thing I think it might be is the structure, the way that you have Ethan, kind of narrating it from the future, present, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
He knows how this all plays out, so there's always this like ruefulness to it,
Yeah.
and every time you get to that final narration, it just wrecks me every time. It's like so good. Like this one is actually more of a warm feeling you leave your readers with. The other three are more on like the gut punch area, and I think
Yeah.
that they all work equally well though, and it's just like something that's really strong for the Reckless series.
Yeah. I mean, I believe that, I don't know who said it, but it's like the opening of a book and the ending of a book are the most important parts of it. Sometimes a great last page can save like a book where you've made a bunch of mistakes. But yeah, it's interesting because I went back and forth a lot on the last page of book one. Initially, I didn't have the last caption there, and it was in my notebook. But when I was typing up the script, I felt like, oh, that might be too much. And then when I saw the page, I just thought, oh no, I want to add that caption. And I had Sean put that caption, and I just thought, oh, it just changed the tone of the book completely.
Yeah.
Like added that moment of sort of nostalgic sorrow to it all.
Doesn't he say something like, I feel bad about it sometimes?
Yeah, he's basically like apologizing for not thinking about the, first love of his life. Like I feel bad about that, I guess.
That's one of the interesting things about, the way that you all work is, I mean, we talked about this over email. I wrote the Little Things column about Reckless, and something like the placement of those lettering, the blocks
Yeah.
of narration is just, me as an outsider. I know Sean is the letterer on the book, but I never really think about who decides where those things are positioned. And it's funny because you look at each of those pages, those final pages, and with the narration, where it's placed is so much of where the impact comes from. The words matter, obviously, but it's
Yeah.
like the kind of pacing is kind of where the gut punch happens.
Yeah, that's usually either like in the script, I'll put like spaces between the captions, or I'll even say like this one down at the bottom, or we'll discuss it, especially if we're adding in new stuff. I'll be like, kind of like, I can now, I'm technologically sophisticated enough to be able to take screen caps of put it right here, here in the corner near the foot. um, but yeah, it's I mean, our collaboration on these books, especially, has been a lot of fun because I think both of us love the books as objects as much as we love them as like whatever works of art we're trying to make. Like we're both obsessed with everything about how they look too, and the design and the production and all that stuff. But like now when we finish the book, usually while Jake's doing all the coloring, because Jake will color the whole book other than the first chapter for like solicitation. Like Jake colors the rest of the book after Sean's finished drawing it, or as Sean's finishing. So he has about a month-ish to color the whole book. And while he's doing that, I'm just like reading the book over every day or two and finding little things that I want to tweak, or little like places where I'm like, I didn't need to say that. Let's cut that caption out. And then Sean has to draw something over that place where there used to be a caption.
Yeah.
um, but yeah, I really like go over them and refine a lot. So like that the final printed version, I feel like I've looked at it so many times and really thought about the flow of the words across the page and the pictures. And, I think about that a lot more now. It's always been an obsession with mine with each page that I make sure the beats on the page feel right. But I think with single issues, you get so caught up in making sure you're getting it out the door every month. And now it's like twice a year, three times a year, we have to get a book to the printer. And so I really can devote this sort of intense period of time to just going over it and making sure everything's perfect before it, goes to the print. And so far we haven't had any typos escape past book. It was like I posted a page in my newsletter that was like a page from the middle of the book, and like I had looked at this page 100 times probably, and one of my newsletter readers pointed out there was a word missing in this one sentence, and I was like, it was at the printer, we had to change it. That
Oh my God.
barely got it changed. I was like, only by pure luck did I randomly select that page, which I'd looked at so many times and not seen it, but that would have driven me up the wall.
Oh my God.
I would have wanted to pulp the whole print run and fix it.
Do you feel like, I mean, it sounds like this approach in this format and everything is, I mean, you'd done pulp, you'd done junkies, you had
Yeah.
done books that were graphic novellas. But one thing that I think that really makes Reckless special is the fact it's a graphic novel series. And I know that, you emailed me about the cover changing, like the color on the Ghost in You, just because you wanted to stand out differently from the rest in terms of colors. But do you feel like
Yeah.
you're appreciating this approach and learning more about it with each passing release?
Yeah, definitely. And well, I always wanted to do a thing like this. Like, the initial pitch for Scene of the Crime way back, 20 something years ago when I first started making a living writing comics. Um, was like the idea was for a series of detective novels, but we were just going to serialize them first. Um, so I always like wanted to do something like this. I just, as my career actually went on, it just seemed like something that the American market would never really support, to just do it in books like this.
Mm-hmm.
But it's really changed my appreciation for the whole industry in a way, and like what we actually do in comics. And it's made it so I think Sean said he found a groove that he never even knew he had, as far as, you know, how quickly he draws the books now and how much he's into them, because he doesn't have to stop every month and worry about the cover or the text pages or all of that stuff. We both really feel like it's refocused us, and it's changed the way that I approach writing, like the books, I think, or like whatever we're doing. Like I now, you know, I still feel like the last half of every book, I'm terrified that I'm going to need an extra 10 pages or 20 pages that Sean's not going to have time to draw, and we're going to have to delay the book or something.
Yeah.
Like my endless nightmare so far. Like each book is like a couple pages longer than the previous one. um, but but for the most part, it's freed me up a lot to be more experimental with the way I write the stories, and to allow uh, things to go off on tangents. And I feel like it's really expanded just our storytelling as artists. And with Jake coloring it, I really feel like, we just kind of let him off the leash, like do whatever, and like we'll pull him back if it's too much. Like, no, we need to see what's happening on this page.
Yeah.
But that's never really happened. But I like that he gets into the mood of each scene.
Mm-hmm.
So I really feel like we're all three just kind of approaching these books in a different way. And Jake says, it's much easier for him to manage his whole workload when he only has to color our books like, 2 or 3 times a year in like a stint, as opposed to having to juggle drawing his own comics and then coloring a page here, a page there for us. Like when we were doing monthly comics and he was coloring that and drawing his own comics at the same time, I don't know how he slept. I mean, he's young, so
Yeah.
I couldn't do that now. But
You better watch out. Chip's trying to steal him from you, though. Newburn's getting too successful.
yeah, Newburn's too successful. It's true. Yeah, I think it's just it's been really a fascinating journey to watch all of us kind of grow into the graphic novels thing, because even Junkies and Pulp just felt like with these one-off things we were doing. Like at the time, Pulp wasn't going to be, you know, like what we were going to go right into a monthly comic after that. So it was just going to be a thing that we had done for a couple months, and just we will probably do another one a year or so down the line. And deciding to do a graphic novel that was twice as long as that. Like these are all like 140 pages, 150 pages. Like they're a significant amount of material, and it's just been kind of mind blowing. Like seeing the market support it, for one thing, which that was always the biggest fear. Because I can remember being back in at Vertigo, like way back at the early days of our career, when they would try to do original graphic novels, and they would always be trying to figure out ways to get retailers to order them as if they were ordering the first new issue of a comic book, as opposed to really, conserving their orders in hopes that they sell a bunch of copies over a year. And, I just feel like we just kind of were at the right place at the right time career wise to make this switch and have it be more embraced. But I'm seeing more and more, of my peers now starting to do original graphic novels, or, releasing their like Substack stuff that way even.
Yeah. I mean, even just like the Abrams comic art stuff that's been announced recently, like Bendis's deal with Andre Lima Araujo, where they're doing, God, I forgot the name of the book, but that looks great. And then like Marjorie Liu and Sana Takeda are doing a book over there, or doing a trilogy over there. But it is interesting though, because if you did something like this back around the scene of the crime, I mean, it wouldn't have worked, probably.
Yeah, I mean, they had tried a bunch of stuff. Remember, well, I can't remember the name of the line actually. It was like a Vertigo line. There was like that Pulp Fiction, like small graphic novels line, and they did History of Violence and
Mm. Oh yeah, yeah.
Edition and a couple of other books. And except for the ones that had movies get made out of them, which happened years after the books were like out of print. Like basically those books, like DC was always trying to find ways to crack that sort of bookstore non-comic reader market. But yeah, they would do those experiments for like a year, and then whatever line that was would die. And because it would have been either too ambitious or just didn't land for some reason or another. But then I remember like when Road to Perdition came out, I don't remember, I think DC had reverted the rights, and so someone else got to do the reprint, or they had to make a new deal with the guys who did the book to do a reprint of it when the movie was out, because the movie was up at the Academy Awards. And that was really one of the first graphic novels in our era that was a huge bookstore hit because of a movie.
Right.
And I arguably after that would be like Watchmen and V, and and then Walking Dead when the TV show hit, that really propelled the comics. Because a lot of the Marvel and DC stuff don't sell a lot of comics.
No. I mean, one of the interesting things is, I mean, I don't have to tell you this, but it is interesting to see how a lot of the long-standing expectations of what does and doesn't sell have been kind of demolished in recent years. For a long time, people would tell me original graphic novels didn't sell. Like, you should always have single issues first because it makes the cash flow, and it acts as advertisement for the graphic novel, the eventual trade paperback. Horror comics don't sell. Miniseries don't sell. And now all of them are selling. It's interesting.
Yeah. I mean, I wonder how much stuff is selling because they have like 47 variant covers sometimes.
Yeah.
That freaks me out. I don't pay too close of attention to that, but there's some part of me that always thinks that's cheating. But at the same time, you're making the money on the thing, and if those books are reaching people, then great. But those kind of tricks of the market freak me out a little bit. But I do think, I mean, obviously graphic novels is the biggest selling book thing outside of Stephen King and J.K. Rowling and a few other people. The biggest selling books in the world are graphic novels now.
Right.
Like Dogman and Catboy. Like, we all talk about those. None of us actually read them because we're not 4 years old. But the fact that like Amazon got into like having their own print lines of books, and they want to get into graphic novels, and it's like this market just continues to expand. And like once kids get into reading comics, they read comics their whole lives.
Right.
Like, it's really rare. It's not the 50s anymore where like a kid gets to 13 and gets teased for reading comics after that. Like everybody's cool about comics now. And so yeah, you are seeing this stuff really hit. It really it's as always, it depends on what the book is, and it depends on it's still going to be really hard for completely unknown creators to just put out an original graphic novel and have it be a huge hit. But it fucking happens now.
Yeah.
And it didn't used to. There's a lot of big name comic book people that like 5 years ago you would have not known who they even were. I remember when James Tynion was Scott Snyder's assistant.
Oh my God. It is really interesting looking at all the stuff James has done and how like that stuff has changed. But it is really interesting because your work with Sean is like so focused. It's, you guys are doing these graphic novels, you're turning them around. Not that you haven't had opportunities, but, the industry itself continues to spread in like interesting, often unexpected directions while continuing to find greater levels of success. I mean, there's like Substack and Zestworld. Yeah. Whenever I say Zestworld, it just sounds so fake. Apologies to the team at Zestworld. It's just...
Zestworld is a weird, I feel like it's a drink or like a lifestyle brand.
Yeah.
Like, I got an email from Alex about his Zestworld title, and I was like, did I miss like an announcement somewhere about yet another comic book platform? Because I completely missed everything about them, but all I kept thinking was like, was this supposed to be a Westworld email?
It sounds like a Sprite advertising campaign that went wrong or something.
Welcome to Zest World, and then like Tony Hawk comes flying in on a skateboard.
I'm seeing this in my head right now, and it's beautiful. But I mean,
Yeah,
all that stuff. I mean, it's there's like the shifting distribution landscape too. I mean, like that's constantly
I'm
changing. The
I'm fascinated to see how the orders on the Substack stuff is now that it's starting to come into print. Like Chip is doing public domain through Image. I think Tynan's first book is coming up through Image pretty soon, and I'm really fascinated to see what happens, to see if the retailers will get behind this stuff or if they'll care that it was on Substack first. I've heard mixed stuff from people who've put out books through Kickstarter, where they've then had trouble getting, the direct market retailers to really want to support the stuff.
mhm.
The retailers, maybe arguably, maybe understandably, like would rather they be the first outlet to buy the books.
Well, and also it's like if the hardcores get eaten out of the audience because they've already bought it in some capacity, it's like who are you selling to?
Like half the Substacks that I subscribe to, I read the stuff when they are putting comic book pages in it. Like Brian Vaughan, every week they put some pages out. Chip always puts pages out. Tynan puts a lot of stuff out. Like I read them as they're going along, but I feel like I'm not going to fully appreciate it until I'm holding it as a book.
Yeah,
So like for me, the Substack is more of like an in-process tease of what it's going to be.
yeah.
But I wonder how much. I mean, how many of those did you subscribe to? Did you subscribe to all of
No, God, I don't. I'm not that rich, unfortunately.
them?
I think I subscribed to four of them, and but it is interesting though. I've talked to retailers. One was very against it. The rest of them were like, I mean, this is great because they don't view Substack as a replacement for the product they're selling. They view it as like advertisement. They view Substack as almost like an ad for the eventual public domain comic.
I find too that there's a difference between the actual real world industry of the direct market and the book market, and so much of the book market is actually online sales. But there is that small bookstores have been coming back in a big way since the big chains have been dying. But I find like the chatter online versus what happens in real life is like we don't talk about that dichotomy enough. Like I was talking to someone at Marvel whose name I won't mention, and they were talking about one of the creators who had actually been paid to work on design work for one of the Marvel TV shows, and had tweeted out something vague about, how it's great to get paid and not just have a thanks to. And everyone took that to mean, oh, so and so got fucked over on such and such Marvel TV show. And there was this whole internet, Twitter, comic book
News
you know,
cycle.
yeah, the 2 weeks of everyone complaining about, oh, Marvel's ripping off yet another person, and which hadn't been the case in this case at all. But Marvel was just like, the guy was like, do you want me to clarify what I meant here? And they were like, nah, don't worry about it. Feel like that they were like, no matter what you say, or those people who are going to be mad at them about that are going to be mad at them about that no matter what, and it doesn't affect their bottom line at all. They don't like, and I've talked to people at all the major publishers, and a lot of them feel like the correlation between the loud comics social media thing versus what retailers actually want, or what people who go into the stores want or even know about, like there's a huge disconnect there.
Yeah, I've heard that too. It is really fascinating. We could go on this forever. I do want to bring us back to Reckless just a little bit more.
Love talking industry stuff.
I know, I could do it, but I mean, this ties into it because Kirkman talked you into keeping going on Reckless. You have 5 books for sure. Follow Me Down's coming after this.
Yeah.
You said early on, you two were considering focusing on Reckless for a bit before making it, like, trying something else, maybe coming back. But it feels, from the outside, it feels pretty full steam ahead. Is that where you're at? Or are you still like, figuring out what's next after Follow Me Down?
Well, I think part of one of the reasons that Ghost in You is about Anna is that Sean and I both have like a very restless creative energy where, we'll if we do something for a couple years, we usually try to do something else after that that's maybe of a similar vein, but to us it feels different.
Right.
Like Junkies was a lot different than Kill or Be Killed, and then because of doing Junkies made me want to do more criminal for a while. And then Pulp was, completely different from, what we're doing in criminal. So I feel like we tend to, after a couple years, want to try and scratch a different itch,
Hmm.
basically. And so I thought after 3 books with Ethan over the course of, it took us a little over a year to do all the books. They came out in like 10 months. And I just knew instinctively it would be more fun to be writing an Anna story, and it would give us that thing that was slightly different about it. And now we're doing the Ethan story without Anna. But for me, it's still always like I have 2 or 3. Like I have this idea for. I mean, it's not really a sequel, but it's another book set in the same world as The Fade Out, like 10 years later.
Hmm.
I've been circling that for a couple years. And I have this other book that I want to do that's just a standalone, like crime existential thriller thing that I've been talking about doing for over 10 years. And I've got notebooks filled with stuff to do it. I thought about doing it as a novel at one point. I thought about doing it as a choose your own adventure book once.
Ooh.
um, and now I'm pretty determined that I've figured out how to turn it into a graphic novel. So usually it's like when I'm getting down to the last like 30 pages of whatever we're working on, I have like this fight going on in the back of my head about what's the most vital thing to get to next.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm not 100% sure. Like either after book 5, we'll go right into book 6, or maybe we'll start on one of these other things, maybe either the Fade Out one or the other standalone one, just to sort of give ourselves a little bit of a break. And I also need to figure out what the hell Ethan does during the 90s. He hasn't told me yet.
I was going to bring that up because now it was 89 in this book, and then you touch on 1994.
Remember, there was a PI who was hired to find out if Courtney killed Kurt.
But that's true. That's true.
I saw the terrible documentary about it.
You're getting into some dangerous territory though, because the internet is starting to come up, which feels like it's going to change things. Like Byron's their go-to because he just finds things. But I feel like there's going to be like
Yeah.
technology creep happening now.
Yeah, it's gonna have to. That is a problem once the internet becomes part of the story. It's like the story changes. I know because at the end of book 3, when I showed Ethan I think he would be about 70 at that point, or like in his early 70s. He was like working on a typewriter.
Yep.
I hope you noticed, and he had a newspaper, and it was the newspaper from that day when I was writing the page. I like went and looked at the LA Times front page and just wrote down the headline, which was about like it was like 122 degrees in the Pacific Northwest that day. And I was like, everyone outside is wearing a mask and it's 122 degrees in fucking Seattle.
I'm going to guess that Ethan is not going to be the best at computers.
Yeah, he's I was talking to this actor about Ethan and Anna, and he was saying just reading the books, he immediately just assumes that when computers become part of it, Ethan will constantly be like, so I need you to find this thing on the computer there, whatever, how they all connect to each other. It's like she's the brains of the outfit and he's the like, point me at that thing and I'll make it happen.
Oh my god. Yeah, I can't wait to see that happen because I feel like there's some comedy opportunities. I do want to go back to like the projects you could possibly touch on next. I will say yesterday when I was doing some research, I came across there is an unreleased Brubaker and Phillips book I'd never heard of. I don't even know if you guys even worked on it. Black Sails? You almost did a pirate vampire book?
Yeah, it was during the era of many pirate vampire books, apparently.
Was that a thing?
And Rick Remender did a pirate vampire book,
Okay.
and there was another book called Vampirates that was published by like Wildstorm too. Yeah, it was. I think Sean was going to paint the art. Actually, it was going to be a fully painted like 3 issue thing that would be collected as a graphic novel. That was before we did Criminal, and it kind of fell apart over contract negotiations because I refused to share the copyright with the publisher, and I didn't want to do like a work for hire agreement. Like the whole point was like we were going to take like a cut and pay so that we had full ownership and control, and go work for like a smaller publisher that had had some successes. And then when the contract, I kept hitting these roadblocks with the contract about them wanting half the copyright for everything. And I just, I was like, all right, well, we're not going to do it then. And I think Sean did like a cover sketch, and that was it. And I had written like half of the first issue. I know it was going to be a period piece that took place along the California coast, and it was during the era when Seabiscuit was
Oh yeah.
in that area, and the vampires were going to kill and eat Seabiscuit at one. But it was kind of like a Jaws story in a way. It was about like a grizzled old vampire hunter who leads this ragtag crew of people out into the misty waters to try to find this boat of pirates that had spent the last 80 years sort of sailing around the world raiding coastal villages and stuff. The vampires had to sleep on the ship because vampires always have to sleep on the soil that they were made on, and they were all killed by a vampire on the ship, and so the sea was their home soil. So they had to sleep on the ship every night, or every day. They'd have to sleep on the ship. But if they touch the ocean, it would kill them too. So
I'm not gonna lie, I'm pretty into Black Sails right now, even though the vampire pirate trend is now gone. But
yeah.
God, now that just makes me think of what we
Someone
do in
else
this.
did something. Oh, Black Sails was the name of a pirate show.
It was the name of a pirate show, yeah.
I liked that show a lot. It was really tense and fucked up.
And now, a quick word from one of off-panel sponsors. That sponsor's Bad Idea. Bad Idea paid for the sponsorship, but they won't give me anything to promote since they're over. So here I am, saying the name Bad Idea. Contractually. I have to. That's it. Bad Idea. Their thing, I guess. And now, back to the show. You have your notebook. You have these ideas, like the story for the Fade Out and the other ones you're talking about. I mean, you always have things in your back pocket, like things you've written in the past that you haven't visited. Do you ever feel like those ideas like age out? Like you love them at one point, but maybe that one's no longer viable for this version of Ed and Sean?
Yeah, actually, a couple of them. Usually the ones where I was trying to be more commercial.
Oh, sure.
I think I was trying to come up with an idea that I felt like, oh, this might hit. Like this will still feel like us, but maybe be a bit more, hooky or something. And I think maybe that's because once times change, you look back and you're like, oh yeah, that was a weird fad where everybody was doing sci-fi books. We still talk about trying to figure out what our sci-fi book would be.
Because you talked about it in between Criminal and Reckless, I think, didn't you? Wasn't there like a sci-fi book on the option on the
There
table?
was before we started Reckless, we were going to start a book that was kind of like hard to describe. It would have been like a sort of a combination between like a fantasy book and like a Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy kind of like 60s era spy story, but in a world where there was magic actually, but not just a world where there was magic, but a world where like everybody kind of knew that there was magic, and it wasn't like you saw it on the streets happening every day. It was like more that, like in Lord of the Rings, right? Like most people in the world know that magic exists and know that there are wizards, but unless you live in Hobbiton, you've probably never seen Gandalf. And even
Right.
then, you may have just heard about this Gandalf guy who comes through every 80 years for like one rando's birthday party.
So you set up some fireworks.
I like the idea of like, imagine a world that was descended from, what if the fairy tales of that are in the history of, European countries, like what if their fairy tales were actually history instead? Like what if there was a world that was descended from like Arthur and Merlin actually,
Mm-hmm.
and and there was still like a handful of people in the world who could do magic. And that was something I thought about for a while, and I thought it would be a fun thing for us to try to do our sort of gritty real world take on something like that. And that was what we were going to do before we decided to do Reckless. And I remember when Sean was drawing the Parker story, and I was getting those pages, I was working on outlines for all of that stuff. And I just kept looking at the Parker stuff and thinking, this doesn't feel quite right. Like, well, the Parker stuff feels more like where we are right now and what we should be doing. And this other thing feels like it's, even writing any kind of Le Carre kind of inspired spy thing, even if you're not talking about the real world, you still kind of are talking about the real world. And I just felt like in the midst of a pandemic and the resurging Cold War, all of that was going to be so depressing to talk about,
Mm-hmm.
and to write about every month. And I thought, of course, like I said, I started out trying to do the Reckless books, so I thought it would be our version of fun.
Yeah.
And like our version of fun still tries to make you cry on the last time. But in the midst of that, our main character murders a bunch of people and somehow gets away with it all the time.
And it's a great time.
It's just like his ex-handler has to call up the cops and be like, you guys don't care about those skinheads, right?
Right.
Like, I like that I base everything in realism until I need the main character to still be around for the next book.
Mm-hmm. I do think it's interesting, like the idea of revisiting your work. You just did the you and Greg Rucka and Michael Lark went back through the Gotham Central was having an omnibus coming out, and Marie Javins gave you the opportunity to kind of revisit it and do a definitive version of that series where I think I'm trying to remember all the details. Like you added in a joke you couldn't do at the time, I think it was.
Yeah, there was a joke that got cut out. It was like something from the Joker story. Actually, there was just like it was a visual gag in like these. The Joker was killing people and leaving like computer messages and stuff. And there was something, I think we couldn't use the word rectum for some reason. And so
what an odd word to not use. It
always really bothered Greg that we couldn't use the word rectum or something like that. And so we asked, hey, can we put this joke back in? And they let us do that. The thing that had driven me crazy was the missing snow. And in the big Harvey Bullock story, there was in two versions of the trade paperback, there was a sequence where all the word balloons were just left out of a scene where he's getting yelled at by the lieutenant. And I'm like, no, this is important stuff. And like, but somehow that layer of, because it was all the old days in the early days of things before they were all done on computer, like people would actually do the lettering on a separate overlay. And so those just got misplaced, I guess, that day. And it was corrected later, but it was like just those little things or like little typos that had always driven me crazy. I told Marie after we were done with it, I was like, well, if this version goes out of print and you guys want to do another version someday, you should let us do the Black Label version where we go through and we take out all the like onomatopoeia stuff and put in the actual swear words.
Yeah.
Do like the R-rated adult, like the uncut version.
That is actually a really good idea. I like that.
See if that ever gets around to happening. It's DC, so you never know. It's like if Marie's still there, we'll probably get away with it. But now they just got bought by another company. So
it's really interesting, like revisiting that stuff, I imagine, for you, because I don't know. I mean, did you know that those are things that if you ever had the opportunity, you wanted to put them back in? Or is that stuff you found when you looked at it?
The snow always drove me crazy, but like DC, Marvel's always been more loose about, like editors and creators talking during the trade stuff. Like you don't get proofs of your trades at either of those places to look through. They don't really want the creators' inputs on the trade department's just kind of doing its own thing. It's taking the stuff out of the comics. If you can, if there's mistakes in the single issues that you want to make sure get corrected for the trade, you tell like your assistant editor or something on Batman, like, hey, remember that word balloon needs to be pointed at a different character. And, you hope that those notes get through to the trades department. But they've never really let us be part of it. Like I would love for Sean and I to do like to oversee like a collection of Sleeper where we actually got to design the book and do behind the scenes stuff, but they've never really involved us outside of, the early days at Wildstorm when Sean was drawing new covers for them. But the DC doesn't, maybe it's more like traditional book publishing in a way, because a lot of my friends who are authors also don't get input on what the cover of their book looks like.
Mm-hmm.
They've shown what the cover of their book is, and they, cross their fingers that they don't hate it. So this was a real different thing for me, because I'd been complaining about the snow for like 15 years to people, like, hey, can we fix that? And then I was like texting with Marie about something else, and she mentioned these omnibuses, that and the Catwoman one. And I just said, hey, there's some random mistakes in the Gotham Central one. Is there any way I can convince you to like let us be involved in that process so we can fix it? And she's like, yeah, let me shoot some emails to some people. And next thing I knew, like, the next day Michael Lark was like making new overlays for the snow, which is much easier for him to do now than when he actually had to do them on acetate with like black, like ink on in a toothbrush.
Oh my God. Yeah, no kidding.
But yeah, that was a lot of fun. And it was funny because, obviously I've been working on the Batman TV show since like last October. And at the time when we were reproofing all this stuff, Greg was writing episode 2 of the Batman show, for me, basically. Like I brought Greg in to do one of the episodes because I thought it would be really up his alley. And so Greg and I were like in Batman like conferences with Bruce Timm and stuff, and then at the same time, like in our evenings, we're reading over like I don't know, it was like 40 issues or something that we did of Gotham Central.
Yeah.
And I hadn't looked at that stuff since we stopped doing it, because there were so many, like for the first 2 years that we did Gotham Central, it was like the greatest experience ever. And then there started to be like internal politics stuff. Like Dan DiDio really wanted Michael Lark to draw a different thing. And so he started messing with the book and telling us that, oh, maybe we need to cut the book, or, or we're going to have to move Michael off of this book because he's getting paid too much, or otherwise Michael will have to take a pay cut. Like the reason Michael ended up going to Marvel and he and I did Daredevil there for years was, partly because DC was like messing around with his contract when he had like a toddler.
Yeah.
And it was like Marvel was offering him like, we'll double your page rate and you can come over here and pick your own projects. And, and so that was part of like how I ended up over at Marvel initially, was that like Michael was like, oh, Ed, you should come over here and work on me with stuff there. But looking at it now, like years later, like just I was so proud of everything that we did in there. And also I felt like it was almost a book, like Powers was doing a very similar idea, but nobody had really done what we were doing in the DC universe at that moment. Like I always compared it to, in my head, I was inspired by Marvels, because what was interesting about Marvels was that you're getting moments of these stories told from this ground level point of view of this reporter who had to like witness these things, and how horrifying the Human Torch and Namor fighting and basically destroying your whole neighborhood would be. And so I always thought about that when we were first pitching like the book I remember when we first pitched Gotham Central to Shrek, we were like at lunch at Comic-Con, and Greg and I talked through that opening scene about the cops who accidentally knock on the wrong door and Mr. Freeze is inside, and it's like, what's that day like?
Yeah.
Oh, and Greg was like up and kind of animating this shattering this poor detective while his partner's like frozen to the ground and has to watch. And it was like, and so that's the opening scene. And then we watch these cops try to solve this cop killing without having to turn on the bat signal, because they don't want the shame of Batman having to solve their cop killing. And that really, I was looking back at that stuff. I kind of can't believe what a great run we had on it all the way through. Like I think all the way through to the end, it still feels like a really complex, like character driven book. And a lot of people now compare it to The Wire when they discover it. They assume it was influenced by The Wire, and it predates The Wire
Right.
by several years. And though it was, heavily influenced by David Simon's book Homicide and the TV show Homicide, obviously. We use the phrase red ball, which I don't know if anyone outside of Baltimore police ever used. You know? I didn't check. I never asked any of the LA cops or the LA sheriffs if they call anything a red ball.
It's interesting because like your current phase of work, you're looking back on that. There's a Catwoman omnibus coming out. You're working on Batman stuff. In some ways, it's like you're time traveling. It's like the turn of the century again for you, except for it's a,
I didn't look at the Catwoman omnibus at all because I don't recall anything in there that I wanted to change.
Oh yeah, that's yeah.
That I would cut out like everything after Cameron. Well, and we also like spent so much time working on the Parker omnibus, which
yeah,
overseeing that stuff, and I was rereading all of Darwin's work, doing that. So yeah, it does feel like I'm in this weirdly sort of nostalgia phase. But I notice when I do go online to like sort of weed through and see what people are saying about our stuff, more and more I notice like foreign like readers talking about American comics a lot more. But I also notice, especially since I got announced on the Batman show, there's a lot of people arguing about whether or not my Batman and Catwoman's are good or not. There's a lot of the Batman community is similar to the X-Men community where like, there's a lot of people yelling at each other about what is or isn't the right interpretation of Batman. And I'm terrified for what's going to happen when they actually see this show. I was talking to Bruce about it. I'm like, we're going to divide so many people. Like, it's going to be so interesting to see what we get accused of or not. Like, all the right people will hate it, hopefully.
I do think it's really interesting though, because it's like all of this work, you have so many big runs on so many big books from Marvel and DC, which for a lot of readers is like the center of their comic book universe. But it's interesting because I imagine once upon a time they started reading your stuff with Sean because it was like, something that DC was publishing also with Sleeper because it was a Wildstorm book. And then Marvel, they were, the Criminal was Icon to begin with and everything like that. So like, oh yeah, I like that Brubaker, I'll check it out over here. But then it's like
when we launched Criminal though, was like I had just done the Death of Captain America and
right.
Sean had drawn Marvel Zombies. So
it's a perfect storm.
We had just sold like 1 million comics between us. So it was like the perfect time to try to do something, that wasn't at that point a real big genre in comics. I mean, crime comics are still a minuscule part of the direct market.
But it is interesting though, because it's like they started probably picking you up because like they loved your Captain America run or they loved your Gotham Central run or something like that. But now it's just like, they're just Brubaker and Phillips fans. And I think that's really fascinating. It's like, I would be interested to know, I mean, it's impossible to figure something like this out, but it's like the makeup of your fandom is probably like a healthy mix of people, like, I don't want to say half, but like a healthy mix of people who loved your superhero work and just followed it over. And now we're like, oh my God, like this crime stuff is even better. It's incredible.
I hear from a lot of people that like sort of like, how comics people sometimes will lapse after college or something like that'll be a big part of their life in like high school and college. And then they'll have that time period for 4 or 5 years where they're not really paying attention. And then they'll come back. I hear from a lot of those kind of people who they were really into like my Captain America or Gotham Central or my Daredevil run or something like that. And then when they come back, they get into like the new stuff that Sean and I are doing and start digging into the back stuff there. I know we do have a ton of hardcore fans who've been around since the Sleeper days, but it's like our readership is, 2 or 3 times what we were selling on Sleeper now.
Yeah.
So it's it's amazing to me. I can't really, other than I guess Gru the Wanderer, a lot of European teams stay together, but they don't put out as much material as we do. I don't think they'll put out a book every couple of years. Like there's not 2 Asterix and Obelisk books a year coming out.
Right.
though that's been around for 70 years or whatever it is. But yeah, I feel like we're a unique thing in the sort of American and British, like, comics community, in that we've just continued to work together and put out so much material. My goal is always just kind of like, as long as the new thing we're working on, is as good as the last thing or hopefully better. But it's always kind of like quantity over, the every 10 years you have to release a masterpiece. It's like, I don't know how you can live that way. Like,
Hmm.
I just like to keep moving forward, and it's like, well, hopefully this book is good. Like, we never know. I was so really I remember when we were sending Ghost and You to the printer, I thought, oh god, I wonder if everyone's going to hate this one because it's an Ethan book. And so far all the press has like loved it even more, and I'm like, oh wow, this was a great idea. But I remember, like, you have your small group of friends that you ask for advice on, and you're never 100% sure if they're fucking with you. Because I remember when I asked all my friends about doing The Last of the Innocent, our sort of take on Archie and Criminal, and all my friends were super excited about that idea. And then as we started working on it, I was showing it to them, and they're like, "Oh, I can't believe you're actually doing this." I'm like, "Great, you guys all told me to."
I didn't think you'd go through with it.
Yeah. So, but yeah, I think the fact that we keep just working as a team, it always cracks me up when people say that we're reuniting for a book or whatever. I'm like, reuniting? It's like, we're not John and Paul. Like, there's been no rift. We just continue to work together.
Yeah, it's pretty dramatic for a team that puts out books like every 4 months or whatever.
Yeah. It's like they've reunited for another book in their wildly successful series of books.
It's funny. Like, I know sometimes when comic creators find a lot of success with like other spaces, other media, like movies or TV shows, and like you have Batman, Cape Crusader, it's like, you know, for some, it's like maybe the allure of that would like make it so comics aren't so attractive. But I feel like, obviously you love comics, but I feel like it'd be really difficult for you to quit comics if only because 5 minutes after you try, Sean would email you for pages and it would make it impossible
Yeah.
for you to do so.
Yeah. I mean, I would never want to. Comics was my saving grace that first year working in TV. Like, I'd had a couple years where I was like selling TV pilots, but you're not really working in TV until you're like on a show that's getting made, and you realize how much of that time is taken from you. Because when you're just writing like movies or TV pilots, you're kind of doing it around your comic scripting, and you can juggle it all but still devote a large part of your day to comics. And I didn't realize how much writing my comics kept me sane until I was working on Westworld, and I had to get up at 5 in the morning so that I could spend 2 hours just focusing on my own writing before I went in to, help these other people build their big story.
Right.
Oh, and with the Batman job, like, part of the allure of the Batman job was, I mean, now a lot of most TV is working from home when you're on the writing side, especially. This is animation, so it's like everybody working from home all around the world, except for wherever the animation studio is. Part of it was like the writing room itself was a very short writing room. We only did a 6-week writing room. I'd be like the head writer, so I'm sort of overseeing everything and working like really closely with Bruce Timm. So I wanted to learn, what his process was like, and how he gets these amazing cartoons made. But like the limited time factor and the amount of, still being able to like juggle the comics around it was really, a key factor in saying yes to the job. Because, I didn't really want to write superheroes again, and I didn't really want to work on someone else's TV thing again. It was just that I reached out to Bruce and I was like, can I at least freelance one of these? And then he started calling me and talking me into taking the bigger job. And I was, oh, God, this is going to be one where I really look back and regret it if I say no to this. And, but yeah, comics is my lifeblood. Like, I can't ever imagine, the only way I would ever, I could ever see myself quitting comics is if, like, I wake up one day and there's like an email from Sean that he's quitting or something, or or an email from his wife that Sean has like passed away while drawing like a too detailed page I wrote. Put too many cars here, Ed. You've killed Sean. But yeah, I can't, it's like when I was a little kid, like age 3 or so, when I first discovered comics, like I just wanted to spend my whole life making comics. And, I realized at some point when I first started making a living doing comics, I realized, I think following like seeing what Bendis was doing and how he was taking control of his career and the way he published, I realized that that was the only way I was going to be able to get that sort of fantasy career that I had in my head, was if I just figured out a way to make it work myself.
Mm-hmm.
And that was, I think, why Sean and I ended up staying together for so long. And after Sleeper, because when we were working on Sleeper, it's like that could have just been it, and we could have just gone our separate ways. Like, I mean, I've worked with a bunch of people that I haven't continued to work with, and but I really felt like a kinship with Sean and the way that we tell stories together, and it was becoming second nature to like write scripts and see it and sort of picture how he was going to draw it. But I knew, like, both of us early on were talking about how much we loved the European market in a way, and the way that books were released there in graphic albums. And I remember, like, personally, I just always loved the look of those Black Sad books, and a lot of European stuff from the 80s, like Sinner or Torpedo, like these character driven graphic novels. And I always was thinking, it'd be great if there was something like that in this market that we could like become part of. And I think around the time we launched Criminal, I just realized the only way that could be that thing is if we just built it.
Yeah.
Like there wasn't that thing, and no company was ever going to come along. Like Humanoids had tried to, like the European publishers had tried to start that kind of market over here, and it wasn't working. And so I was just like, well, maybe we try to figure out our own hybrid version of something like that. And so we've spent, the past 15 years sort of trying to build our own way of working within the comics market. And, it's helpful that, bookstores, 10 years ago, bookstores weren't carrying as much like graphic novels as they do now even. But it's really helpful that now we're coming along, and the bookstore market for our books is, roughly like half of what we sell now, actually. And 10 years ago it would have been like 10 or 15% probably. But now I have conversations with publishers about like, what's the format for the trade paperback? Like, do we like what bookstores want is this, what comic stores want is this. And like we put out the Friday collection. Well, it's the same size as the Parker books. It's like it's actually, if you put it right next to the comic, it's not that much smaller than a comic, but it's like 6x9 as opposed to like 7x10 or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever size comics are. But yeah, Marcos and I discussed it early on that we wanted the collections of it to be the same size as like Darwin's Parker books, because we thought it would just look cool, stand out in comic stores, but also we've been hearing from the publishers that the bookstore market really likes that size. And if you look at all those million selling like graphic novels, none of them are comic book format. They're all the same size as like a normal trade paperback book, so like I'm interested to see. I think a couple different publishers are going to start trying to put out their trade paperbacks in those slightly smaller sizes to see how they do outside the book market, or in the book market outside the comic market.
It's funny though, because that was a size that I think once upon a time was considered to be something that didn't sell. Like I remember Marvel did Runaways originally in that kind of around that size. It was like the digest size.
They had that whole manga line, right?
Yeah. Spider-Man Loves Mary Jane was that size too.
Some young Prince Namor book that looked very manga-like.
Yeah, but I mean, like that stuff, I remember talking to retailers being like, we can't shelve this, it's too small. And now it's just like, whatever, it sells. It doesn't matter if we shelve it, or like shelve it and it's too small, because it'll be out of here in 2 seconds anyways. And
yeah,
I don't know. I mean, I think it's pretty amazing how comics have evolved over the time you and Sean have been working together. But it's cool hearing that this is, not, this sounds like Sean's wife's message again, but it does feel like it's like Reckless is like a culmination of everything you've done in a very real way. And but Ed, that is all I have for you. Thank you so much for coming on to talk about Reckless, The Ghost in You, and everything else. I appreciate you taking the time.
Absolutely, man. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode of Off Panel with writer Ed Brubaker. You can find his work in the just released The Ghost in You at Image Comics. Also, big thanks to Deanna Chapman for stepping in to edit this podcast. Deanna is the best. Love Off Panel and want to support it? Subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts today and give the show a rating or review while you're at it, but 5 stars only. You can also support the show by backing on Patreon. Find the show at patreon.com/offpanel, and when you back it on there, you get early access to each week's podcast as well as weekly content and more. Want even more? Subscribe to my subscription comic site Sketched at sketch.com for long-form articles, interviews, and the rest of the site's content and its members-only forum. You can find Off Panel and Sketched on social media by liking on Facebook at /Sketched, that's SKTCHD, follow on Twitter and Instagram at @SketchComic, or following me at @SliceFriedGold. Big thanks to all my existing patrons, including Ben Damstead, Cameron Brown, Rom V, Devin Fitzsimons, Nick Walker, Patrick Coyle, Isaac Warren, Scott Carpenter, Rent Narb Studios Comics, Capes and Tights Podcast, Klaus Van de Ven, Brian, Submit Industries, Raj Patel, Jack Mulqueen, Kyle, Carl Kerschel, Robert Masella, Elza Chartier, Luke Nakashoji, Elliot Metz, Dr. Luke, Scott Hazelwood, Scott Buwan, Michael Tunk, Canadian by Proxy, Johnny Cannon, Bradley Rader, Carl Troy, Brandon DePillis, Patrick Brower, Declan Shalvey, Dan Guarino, Josh Williamson, Adam Freeman, Ben Wild, Brian Klein Q, SB, Nick Bennett, Daniel Whitfield, Susanna Polo, Reed Hinkley Barnes, Mario Tiambang, Andrew Carita, Matt Mahoney, Charlie Chu, Stephen Hall, Pensacola Pop Comics, Kim Eslin, Philip Myra, Christian Shelton, Kenny Porter, Chris Pacello, Torin Grunbeck, Fuzz Bubbles, Christopher Todd, Transmitter Down, Waltz Comics and Books, Carl Mizell, Paul Slates, Akil Wilson, Alex Dimitriopoulos, Terry Dodson, Wesley Giff, Sean Kirkham, Alistair Ross, Julio Anta, Brett A. Schmidt, Jason Goodmanson, Paul Reinwan, Vita Ayala, Tara Ferguson, Dave Slusher, WMQ Comics, Akil Kokachi, Sean Pinello, Ken Heidelman, Philip Seavey, Al Ewing, Ryan Alcock, David Kelly, Robert Wilson IV, Nick Polito, Brendan Fletcher, Jonathan Nilsson, Matthew Groom, Jason Massey, Adam Bogart, Matthew Taylor, Nick Patera, Jacob Sorelli, Ford Gilmore, David Baraldi, Nick Hall, Bjorn Basin, John Hendricks, Steve Anderson, Ian Maxwell, Cliff Chang, Colin McMahon, Chris Palmer, Scott McGovern, Nathan Fairbairn, Kat McKenzie, Adam Highfield, Fiona Staples, Mark Abnett, Mike Murphy, Michael Shirley, Tom Barnett, Jim Demonakos, Norbert, Nick Lowe, James Kaplan, and Mission Comic Star in San Francisco. You guys are all the best. A quick thanks to Upright T-Rex Music, who wrote and performed Off Panel's theme song just for the show. Check out their music on Spotify because it's completely delightful. Thanks for listening, and tune in next week for another episode